give it 2 more minutes and then everybody will be zoomed in.
Fine for me.
For the first, but not the last, Compliance Tuesday talk.
Maybe depends. I guess we need to perform somehow.
We discussed, André and I, we discussed already that this will depend on the feedback of you guys about how this this concept will be. But I think anyway, we'll need another hour somewhere in the Q4. So for those already signed in, thank you. Welcome for this first ever Compliance Tuesday talk and a new format. My name is Caspar de Horst from ProductIP. You may have known me already from previous event. Welcome, André Gierke.
Thank you.
EPR Compact. To do the kickoff of this first event, we had our initial meeting in Dresden a couple of months ago, and we had a pre-meeting 3 weeks ago already at your offices, where we quickly identified that we both have a similar kind of energy with respect to the approach of compliance issues in general.
Right.
And we also identified that basically where ProductIP deals with establishing a point where you actually can start placing products on the market, that you actually pick up with what is the consequence of that, what you call extended producer responsibilities, which sometimes confuses people because I'm not a manufacturer, but so why do I need to talk with that? And this morning you very nicely brought some belated cake for my birthday in a packaging. I won't mention the name, but they were good muffins. And it says climate neutral packaging, which actually was already one of the triggers about claims on packaging. So we'll definitely go into that and other topics. Compliance Tuesday talk, no slides, no nonsense. There will be questions probably, but we'll answer them separately, or we come back with an information sheet, or this is merely about sharing ideas and concepts about what we both see in the market, where those who want to make a change or an effort actually run into.
Yeah, right.
And we share this situation where we find that often, yeah, you call it reactive. People are reactive. They see the problem from outside in and try to solve the new situation with existing, non-existing methods in that sense. A little bit back, you know, if you say structures, or it's difficult to solve new with old. This is a general phrase. It's not new, you know. Waste regulation originates in the EU from the 75-442 EC 1975. Ah, that's boring, Caspar. Okay, let's go back 47 years from 1975, and we are in 1928. So imagine you are a company in 1975 coming to the conclusion that you have difficulty to deal with something that was invented in 1928. That is basically the reality of today. It's not all new. It's materializing in new ways and in new concepts. So to declassify it as new, I think we won't go in that way. We also not judge you that haven't taken care of it. You know, you have grown your business. So if anybody should be able to deal with it, it should be you. Imagine if you started building your business tomorrow and you have to deal with all kinds of things. So, André, when I say structure, old cannot cause new, what in general do companies come to you for with their questions?
Yeah, at the moment it's quite typical. I mean, it was kind of like the header of this Compliance Tuesday talk, right? At the moment, about 90% of the clients contact me because they struggle with packaging obligations, with typical new marking obligations.
Right.
And as you mentioned just before, this topic is not new. And also the packaging directive is not new. It's, well, entered into force in 1994.
Right.
So it's 28 years of packaging directive and national obligations in the different member states. What's new, somehow new, are the sorting instructions. And of course, all of these issues and topics, they are growing, they are developing. Circular economy is getting more and more popular. the obligations increase, and therefore people need to deal with it.
Right.
And when you say we have like old structures which doesn't solve new problems, yeah, I can definitely agree, because people just react, as you mentioned earlier. They have like a troubleshooting because someone asks a question, and it's about, hey, do you apply the new labeling obligations in Italy already?
Right.
How do you deal with a triman? Can we just sell your products, or is there anything that we need to take care of? And then they need to react because they didn't take care of it earlier. And maybe they had the wrong mindset, because people often think about EPR as like a waste issue. Yeah, it's about waste in most of the heads, but you need to switch minds somehow, because EPR is about compliant market access, and there are so many obligations related to it. Yeah, you somehow need to implement EPR within your company according to a common thread.
Arthur, do we need to change anything with respect to sound?
The message, your sound is
Peeping. You can adjust the right sliders on the board if they're clipping. So the two left slides are, if they're clipping, then they are clipping. Yeah. Yeah, you know, first Compliance Tuesday talk, we need to have some adjustments. So basically you were saying they are reacting because somebody says you need to have a logo explaining something around the packaging. And that is actually the trigger to do an action without going back and saying, why do I need to do this? So, you know, there must be logic in this kind of regulation. Tell me a little bit about what kind of, let's say, a decision tree structure. where does it go wrong, or the other way around? Where would you start, with product or with supply chain role? Or?
Yeah, I would start at the beginning. So when I think about a new product, which I just source independently if it's private label or if it's my own brand,
right?
I would think EPR from the beginning as product compliance. And I need to think about my role as well, about the markets where I want to sell those products, because we have like different obligations in different member states. It's a member state approach in regards of the EPR obligations. So I need to face different roles, different obligations based on how and where I place products on the market. And I need to think about those right at the beginning.
Right.
If for me, for example, it's quite clear that my packaging is placed on the market in Germany only, well, the obligations in regards of labeling of packaging are low or not really existing.
Right.
But if there's a chance that my products in household packaging are sold to France, for example, okay, and then I need to think about the triman as well. Even though maybe I'm not the one directly responsible because it's the producer in accordance with the French law. But well, if he wants to sell the products, they need to comply somehow. So either I provide him with all of the information related to it, or I deal with it by myself in order to be a reliable, trustworthy partner. So I need to think about EPR from the beginning.
So would it be a good idea for somebody who wants to attack this kind of topic to actually start to make like a mind map or a tree and saying, okay, these are the main products, these are the countries that they end up, could be under my brand or could be private label and via route, retail, e-tail, direct, hand out. You know, there could be different ways to market. Because I don't, if you haven't done that, it's very difficult for you as a consultant, you know, to know where to start, because you probably will start with fixing that one what is biggest first, right?
Yeah, right. What you mentioned with that mind map is typically like the journey a customer goes with me. I call it EPR assessment.
Yeah,
it's just getting to know the client, getting to know the customer. What does he do? How does he do it? Where does he do it? What's the actual status quo? So what did he take care of already? Are there like lacks of compliance? Is there room for improvement? Are there processes in place? Processes are so important, in my opinion, in order to really master EPR. And it's kind of like a pity, but you don't find that much processes out there.
Okay.
So of course you need to have that map and you need to have a scope, because different products are just covered by different scopes of legislation, and therefore different obligations apply to the products, to its packaging. And yeah, you need to have that map and consequences.
So to say that putting a logo on the packaging is the least you should be worried about, that's an understatement. Because the consequence actually of placing a product on the market means you need to participate in certain schemes. And depending on who is participating in the supply chain role, in which way, you or your customer need to participate with schemes, recycling schemes in those member states. And participating in those schemes requires data. So
data are a key issue, definitely.
But you know, I can manage data by Excel. You know that is no problem.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And somebody already took care of it about 10 years ago.
Yeah.
He's not there any longer, but the report is still there.
I remember a quote of you 3 weeks ago, and I'll repeat it. And you guys might want to write this down and let André explain to us what it meant. He says, you got to get out of the genius role. So,
yeah.
So tell me a little bit about what's behind the title of that storyline, getting out of the genius role.
Getting out of the genius zone. It's yeah, however you call it. I mean, it's always the same. If I face customers and ask them how they deal with EPR or how they came up to be responsible for that issue, in every company, more or less, it's the same. There was someone, a girl, a guy, whatever, they were at the wrong time, at the wrong place. And so they ended up being, yeah, they made a motion. Yeah, they had eye contact in a meeting at the wrong time, whatever. So they became responsible for EPR. And what happens then is that they really are faced with a purpose, because often they are told, hey, there's that new issue, and I know you got 100% workload already, but there's this new task, EPR, and it's just waste. It doesn't add any value to the company. It's just waste. It's a cost. So that's great because, well, I mean, it sounds important, right?
I don't want you to waste no more time on it, and you're already 100% occupied, so this is a perfect fit.
You're right. And you know what? We're already registered. So we went half of the way already. Yeah. So
we got a number.
We take care of it. We got a number.
Yeah.
If we identify that number on relevant sources, I don't care about that. Yeah, but we got a number. And there's just that report. We just talked about that report. It's that Excel sheet, which is there since 10 years and nobody knows where it refers to or whatever. But you know what? Don't worry. Nothing ever happened, right? There were no fines. There was no prohibition of sales, whatever. So don't worry.
But then something happens to the genius zone.
It's not about genius zone yet, because, well, you have that new task. So you're like a one man, one woman, one team show, whatever.
Right.
And you now think, okay, this is something about waste. There are administrative and operational tasks that need to be fulfilled.
Right.
So I go and seek a service provider for it. There are lots of them out there. And as always, as internally, they're the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? But it doesn't really matter which one you choose, because every service provider can only be as good as the information you provide them with.
Right.
And then it comes to the genius zone, because when you start with that new topic, well, your knowledge is not really there. So you need to grow. You need to educate yourself. There may be trainings out there, whatever. So what happens is that you gain knowledge, and you have that knowledge between your ears, right?
Right. You become the ERP genius.
You become the internal EPR genius.
EPR genius, yeah.
And you deal with it. And the typical contact person for EPR deals with like everything, with like reporting, labeling, information, registration, whatever. He tries to deal with everything. It's often troubleshooting, but he gains knowledge. Nevertheless, a lot of information do not end up at this person because the awareness is not there that something is relevant. Right. So the guy's purchasing articles.
Market or new product or new brand or new supplier.
Yeah, you don't receive any information that this happens.
Right.
So that's a pity. But nevertheless, you grow. and you gain knowledge. But since this knowledge is in your head and not anywhere else, well, I mean, what happens?
It's on my laptop.
Knowledge in your brain
It's on
doesn't
my
scale.
laptop also.
It's on your laptop, right? Perfect. It's maybe an Outlook task, right?
Right.
Nobody has access to your Outlook, but there's a task in there.
Right.
So when you're not there any longer, there is something in Outlook or in Excel, right?
So this is part of a critical operation process for a company, and it's not taken care of with the same kind of importance or accuracy as, for example, invoicing and
No.
financial aspect, which it should be, because it's strategically important. And these
I-
are obligations,
These are
financial
obligations.
legal obligations.
We're talking about compliant market access.
Right.
If we face like the obligations related to EPR, we talk about requirements related to the product, its packaging, information, labeling. Yeah, we talk about registration. We talk about information that should be visible to clients,
Sure.
to consumers. We
Right.
talk about recycling, of course.
Right.
And we talk about data. Data are a huge issue, and we will address that within the talk.
Right.
But there are so many obligations that you need to fulfill in order to assure you act compliant and that all of your sales guys are even allowed to do their job. So you need to implement EPR in your company according to a common thread. And that's when the genius zone comes in. In most of the companies, you have that one knowledge person.
Very comfortable if you that one.
Very, yeah, no,
Very strategic.
It could be,
Yeah.
because you could earn a lot of money for it.
From a company point of view, it isn't, of course.
For the company point of view, it isn't. And the guys or girls, what their problem is, they don't negotiate right. Because I mean, they are very important if you think about market access. But since they think it's about waste, they do not negotiate that that wage that they should earn.
Right. So you say that the contracts that are made by service providers also don't get the proper attention
No,
that you normally would give when it's a normal procurement.
no, it depends. It depends on the size of the
Sure,
company
you
and
know,
the structure. And
Exceptions confirm the rule.
yeah, maybe you have like the obligation to have a new tender every second year or every year or whatever.
Right.
There are those companies out there, and that's very good though. But there are a lot of companies still where, especially those service provider bills, they're just passed.
Right.
And it's not even the purchasing department taking care of those. It's the contact person for EPR.
I think, many companies have changed their supply chain roles. In the traditional way to market, they might have a limited group of end customers, brick and mortar retail. Most of them now have developed their own brand, which changes their supply chain role. They find their own route to market, and I cannot blame them for them. I would probably do the same. It gives you a more independent position in the market. You could try out your certain things. Maybe you can sell some redundant stocks that are still there, but it puts you in a different position. And at the same time, we see that we see it from a product compliance point of view. Products without any technology, we're adding technology, so we're making our lives more complex in that sense. But what we also see, and that's a little bit what you said, we don't see that change affect the way they deal with their business. So they all agree, but they still try to solve the new with the old. And the old is, in our opinion, Excel sheet in that sense, or doing nothing. Let's go back a little bit to the regulation itself. Originally, when we talk about packaging, we only talked about consumer packaging, but something has changed dramatically there as well.
Yeah, we need to focus on all packaging, and more member states do that.
Right.
More member states apply obligations also related to labeling to, for example, transport or tertiary packaging.
Okay.
I mean, have a look at Italy, for example.
Right.
So yeah, this develops and grows as well.
So that means that you need to start marking other packagings as well, which you have never considered as a packaging ending up at a consumer that needs to have such a marking. So I have my product and I do everything right, and then I package it in a box and I ship the box to a consumer, and I forget that box should also have marketing.
Yeah, that is a shipment packaging, which
but
you
ends up
refer
at
to.
my private house.
Yeah, sure. A shipment package is like the Amazon carton or the Amazon box, for example.
Right.
Yeah, this is packaging you need to consider and that you need to think of in regards of compliant labeling. Yeah.
And then you have filling materials.
You have filling materials, and depending on the member state in which you act, you need to think of labeling, or do I have to label, how to label, especially in Italy, there's a chance to go for digital labeling, for example. But you need to think of that at least. There will be an obligation to label that commercial packaging in France from 2025 as well. So the trimen will be extended somehow.
You have a little bit time for that.
You have a little bit time for that, though. But you obviously have to take records or keep records. So on, well, the masses you placed on the market and how you dealt with those, even though if you recycled those.
So that digital marking you mentioned, that is perhaps something that you could compare with digital product passport or other kind of information. There will obviously, it will be relevant if consumers can have access to information digitally as well. It solves a lot of paperwork. The machine directive is considering basic manuals or instructions to be provided digitally. Not the warnings that have to be on a product, but it makes perfect sense, I guess.
Yeah, I love that digital passport initiative, to be honest. We live in a digital world.
Right.
Why not providing relevant information in a digital way?
Right.
So I love that.
And God knows with Corona, we get used to QR codes.
We get used to QR codes, that's right. But what's kind of like a pity at the moment is that if we face EPR obligations, the digital labeling solution is not there actually, because most of the labels or information need to be provided attached or enclosed to the product.
Okay.
So it needs to be somehow haptical, physically. Yeah. Italy, in regards of the environmental labeling obligations for packaging, is the first member state referring to a digital solution. And just something about the digital product passport. At the end of June, I was in Berlin and had a presentation there at the Fraunhofer Institute.
Okay.
And there was another one presenting. He's part of a project related to the digital product passport. And that was quite interesting. And I took the chance to ask the question how they think about EPR in regards of the product passport, and do they consider EPR as relevant for the product passport as well, because there are so many information that could be provided in a digital way, like how to remove batteries or what's the meaning of the crossed out wheel pin and whatever.
Makes sense.
But unfortunately, his answer was, well, at the moment we look at a European level, but we don't look at individual member states. So something like the trimen, for example, with harmonized sorting instructions in France, is probably not covered by the digital product passport initiative, if it develops as it seems to be actually.
You just mentioned Europe. Well, we have a good contact in Brussels that is working on harmonization in general. And he responded immediately after we sent out the original invite of this event. And I mentioned already, this is the first Compliance Tuesday talk. It won't be the last, but it's also not the last on this topic, because either now or later or tomorrow, when you have lost another night of sleep about this topic, send to me your driving key questions that you would like to have presented or discussed with somebody in Brussels. And that is definitely something that we will have on the agenda. It might be not in real life meeting, but perhaps not a Zoom discussion on that. But I think anybody in the political arena, we need to give them heads up first and say, this is basically what is in the market, and we will filter out a little bit that together and say, so these are the main topics that we would like to address. And you told me that actually there is there's a revision or a change coming on in packaging.
Yeah, sure.
Q4.
Yeah, sure. There's a new draft expected of the packaging directive. Hopefully, it's going to be a regulation.
Okay.
There are hints for it.
Okay.
And it's expected to be published in the mid of November.
Okay. As draft.
As a draft.
Okay.
As a draft. So it will take some time.
Sure.
If we just.
But the draft will give some directions.
It will hopefully give some directions, and this will be very, very exciting.
Right. We had some pre-discussions, and you know, I think nobody, also you in the audience, you're not against recycling and circular economy, and icons are a better way to explain things to consumers than having it in multiple languages. You know, it would be better that if you would have a digital explanation table somewhere on the website or via digital product passport to explain to the consumers what it is, then at least all the member states could drive the communication in one way. An icon is an icon, the same as with WEEE, a waste bin is a waste bin, and paper is paper. So you can say the French are making things complex, but in many a way they might be ahead of the game, and having a hunch of this might be the way.
French is kind of like an early adopter in these regards. I don't like all of the initiatives out there. Okay. We will maybe talk about some of those.
Sure.
I guess we have some problems out there, and harmonization is like a key to solve a lot of problems.
Well,
also in regards of free riders and
access to markets, right?
Right, and this is something that we need to strive for.
Mm-hmm.
There's a problem out there actually, because in the different member states we got different collection structures.
Okay.
So if there are different structures, it's hard to go for like a harmonized information or sorting instruction. So maybe we can rethink that. But on the other hand, in my opinion, sorting instructions can only be like a supportive measure, because using sorting instructions, I give you a hint on how to recycle or dispose of that waste correctly. But who reads that? It's like the responsible consumer who reads that, because he somehow cares. The irresponsible consumer
will throw it away anyway.
Right. So we need to rethink information and education in these regards as well. Yeah, the producer plays a part in this game, but maybe we must adjust obligations in regards of information on a national level, and maybe think about education at home, of course,
right,
but also in the kindergarten, in schools, so that I raise awareness for an issue and I educate people on how they care, why to take care, and how to sort correctly and not litter, for example.
I'm not entirely against it, but let's talk economy, because it's the economy, stupid. When you take care of EPR, let's focus on packaging mainly, because it's such a hot topic with all the markings, etc. Are there things to gain when you start to look at your packaging and basically have an approach, rather than just be flooded with what's out there in the market, with everybody says my supplier, like one OEM supplier is just providing you with a double blister and a extra foil with inside some wraps, etc., and you ship it again in your own carton to a consumer, where actually it's only internet sales. You could have an opinion about that. So let's put different areas on the table. First, if you would look at packaging, would you be able to make your life more simple from the EPR point of view? From ProductIP point of view, I know it would make your life simpler from a REACH compliant point of view. REACH is an article. According to REACH and POP regulation, product packaging is an article. So substances of very high concern, or POPs, apply to the packaging as product. So you could have a recall for cadmium in a poly bag in a fully compliant product.
Yeah.
And then you're running into a lot of shit. So reducing the complexity of packaging would help you from product compliance, the packaging being an article, but also probably on markings. And and there we make the bridge to the data. I need to have a data layer of everything I buy and then sell on. So if I make a complex world, I have so many parameters to monitor.
Sure.
Right. So what we're talking about, if you are small, medium-sized to large-sized customer, I can save a couple of thousands or four digits, 5 digits, because it's the economy, stupid. You can say, yeah, we'll deal with it.
Well, so complex. There are so many dimensions on how to answer this question.
But it is substantial.
It is substantial. I mean, of course, if I, for example, reduce plastic packaging,
right?
Well, there's no plastic packaging tax requirements or information obligations related to the packaging I place on the market, right? So it's somehow easier. Maybe the costs are lower in regards of system participation, because if I just place paper or cardboard packaging on the market, costs are just lower than they are for plastics, just for example. If I have, well, just one piece of packaging, I just need to apply one label on that packaging, for example. It makes life possibly easier.
Yeah.
We could talk about another solution in France, but that's somehow nonsense.
Yeah,
so
that goes into much
just forget about it. So it can make life somehow easier. Also in regards of keeping records, it can be cost save. Yeah, it can save costs. It's a strategic decision.
Yeah. So. But that data need to come from somewhere.
Yeah, definitely. And those data are a lot, and they will increase a lot.
So this is a similar data challenge that we as ProductIP face. So people say, my supplier won't give me a bit of material, my supplier won't give me, well, they won't or they can't. So so they probably have bought a batch of products and they try to sell it and they forgot to buy the data with it. And then you're stuck with it. And I think that in the future, we can talk about fulfillment service providers, but for sure, large brick and mortar retail, if you cannot provide the data, they won't have your product on the shelf because they are liable in those member states.
Yeah.
And fulfillment service providers, the same. So you can have a non-compliant product from a ProductIP point of view, but if you don't have the data to participate in the EPR channel, you cannot access the market from that point of view. It's become mandatory to play the game.
If you lack information, you lack opportunities.
Right.
So that's quite for sure. And those increase. And I don't know, have you heard of the new obligations in France related to environmental information on quality and characteristics?
No, tell me about it.
It enters in force on 1st January 2023. And you don't just need the typical reporting like information like weight or measures or whatever. You will need a whole lot of more information, maybe on the compostability of packaging, but also on recyclability, repairability, presence of hazardous substances or rare earth and whatever. So there are many more dimensions.
Basically, ERP meets eco-design.
Yeah, somehow, right?
You make the bridge very easy for me. You knew it. I just wrote down greenwashing because when circular economy is talk of the town in general, that means that the marketing department is likely to, to write down on the packaging klimaatneutrale verpakking or climately neutral packaging. What the hell does that mean? Or compostable or biodegradable. Is there anything in legislation connected with that? Because from product compliance point of view, people are still using RoHS compliant logos on their product, which is not allowed because you should not differentiate your product among legislation that you're mandatory to comply with. It's like saying, my toaster, buy my toaster because it's electrical safe. Yeah, duh. You see, nobody's using the low voltage directive green because it seems to make sense, but the RoHS compliant green because it's somehow environmental, which actually it's not. It's to do with recyclability.
It's a nice logo.
It's a nice logo, but we all design our own. But obviously, from our we have the ProductIP platform, but we have also our label check service, and we are more and more confronted with, I cannot blame them, the enthusiastic marketing department outings about all kind of environmental claims.
Yeah, those will not be allowed in the future. I mean, France again is an early adopter.
Okay.
They, in regards of packaging, they forbid these environmental claims from 1st January again, 2023. So it's not allowed to apply any of those claims.
Right.
And if you, for example, refer to a packaging as being compostable, you need to prove it. So there are some criteria that need to be
so it is allowed, but you need like a third-party proof.
There are some of the statements are allowed.
Yeah.
But they need to apply to requirements.
Okay.
So
cool.
But other ones aren't. So
talking about third-party proof, if you are participating, and these are mandatory schemes in WEEE, recycling of electronics and electrical products and batteries and packaging, is that just like voluntarily, I need to register and provide data, or what kind of market surveillance is there?
Depends. Depends on well, the area. Do we talk about batteries or electrical and electronic equipment, or do we talk about packaging? And depends on the market as well. So in Germany, for example, if we have a look at the packaging,
right,
if you place more than 80 tons of glass packaging on the market, or more than 50 tons of paper or cardboard, or more than 30 tons of, well, the rest of packaging material on the market,
right,
then there is like a declaration of completeness, which you need to take care of. And therefore a third party will, will check everything.
So a third party will enter the genius zone.
They will see if you deal with it correctly.
Okay.
Well, they get like their catalog on what to check and how to check it. Yeah, and then they gonna visit you and see how you're dealing with it.
Is that tricky because the scope of the packaging, let's say carton paper, if you previously just looked at the total tonnage of your consumer packaging, and now you need to start to incorporate everything else, it might be well that you just start to enter that threshold.
Yeah, right.
But typically the one that is dealing with the traditional EPR data, supplying the data to the Lambels and the takeaways of this world, they might not even A, realize that the scope has changed. B, they might have no access to all these carton boxes that are used, or shipping boxes, which they also need to consider. So they might even not be aware that they went over a certain threshold.
Yeah, so maybe they just don't report like amounts higher than the threshold.
Exactly.
Maybe they're the lucky ones out there, so nothing ever happens.
Yeah.
But maybe if there's like a hint, for example, in that state, well, there may be a check. Nevertheless, that doesn't happen that much, to be honest.
Right.
But if I'm the one that needs to deal with that declaration of completeness because I report amounts that are higher than the thresholds, yeah, then this is going to be checked as well. And what you talk about is typically like shipment packaging. Like maybe I use fulfillment by Amazon, just as an example.
Right.
So I'm the seller,
right,
but they do the shipment for me and so on and so forth. So I'm responsible for that packaging since the 1st July of this year. So Amazon needs to report those figures to me.
Right, because they do
they
do it on my behalf.
They do it on my behalf.
And they don't have the obligation, except they need to tell you, otherwise you cannot fulfill your obligation.
You're right.
They probably have that data for you.
Yeah, I guess Amazon is aware of these obligations.
Yeah.
But maybe I use another service provider, a fulfillment service provider.
Right.
He needs to gather those data as well.
Right.
Does he do it? Interesting. Maybe I do fulfillment for other of my clients, which do private label, whatever.
Right.
So I'm dealing with that service as well for the dealing with the fulfillment.
So that is,
do I gather those data actually?
That is the mind map first. You need to make.
This is one part, one of a lot of parts of that mind map.
Right. Yeah, you explain. Interesting case. If you sometimes lose us a little bit, this is probably because you didn't make the mind map. What if there is a case where there is like fulfillment by Amazon, it's not to blame Amazon on anything. It's just, it's a good name because they do FBA. And I'm ordering something, but there's two different brands, two different partners, two different Amazon sellers. Their product ends up in this box. So Amazon needs to split up the weight of that carton and the filling material. And basically, let's say it's Andre, his product, and my product ending up at Arthur, his private home. So Amazon needs to figure out which part goes to your weight and my weight. Even if you're a fulfillment service provider, you are an active role in the supply chain, and you need to consider your obligations of sharing data. And
You're right.
In the beginning, I said to you, the traditional way of traditional retail using traditional methods to solve the new problem is to say, Andre, this is fine. You want to sell the products to me. You take care of EPR, all right?
Sure.
And here's in the contract, Andre is responsible for product compliance. Thank you. This is, don't come to me. You deal with it.
You're welcome. It's easy.
I've solved it. I have everything is registered.
Everything is registered because I register for you, right? You're selling in other countries as well. It's in the contract, right?
It's in the contract, right? And you told me you registered.
Yeah, perfect
So what's
solution.
wrong with this picture?
Perfect solution. First remark, most of the contracts out there do not even consider EPR as relevant.
It's not same as product compliance?
No, product compliance is there somehow because
so I should mention EPR separately in my supplier contracts?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Because product compliance is about, hey, from me, you receive compliant products, right?
Right.
But who deals with EPR? Not many parties deal with it.
Okay. But that's interesting.
And if so,
it's legally, there's two pillars. They're connected.
Definitely.
But if you just write about product compliance and not mention EPR in your contracts, this is a potential.
It's a different story.
Sure.
I mean, those topics, they walk hand in hand, right?
Sure.
So I need to have that compliant product and a compliant safe product, which somebody holds in his hand at the end. But there are different obligations on how to place those products on the market, and the producer of a product may be a different one if I face product compliance obligations and EPR obligations, because I have that member state approach. Yeah. For example,
right.
You import a private label product from China to the Netherlands.
Yes.
And you're the importer, which is referred to, and so on. So you're the responsible one for product compliance.
Yes.
I guess it's like that. It's not my.
By Caspar.
Yeah. CE declaration by Caspar. Perfect. So then you have that.
You are the retailer.
You have that product.
Right.
And you sell that product in the Netherlands to me in Germany. And
yes.
I'm a retailer and I place that product on the market in Germany. So maybe it's an USB stick.
Right.
Okay. So if I import that one, it may be your label as well, whatever. I'm the one referring to the German law.
Sure.
Who's responsible as a producer of electrical and electronic equipment. In Germany.
Yep.
So I need to register and deal with all of these issues.
Yeah.
Am I defined as a producer for the packaging as well? Depends. Depends on who's responsible for the product when it's crossing the border.
So there you have one thing that Europe at least need to harmonize.
Right. Right. So the producer definition
on the outside of the box.
The producer definition is not harmonized.
Wow.
Though, but nevertheless, well, I received that product, so I'm responsible as a producer in Germany. Although in regards of product compliance, you are the producer.
Right.
So we have different producers who are responsible, and we need to consider that. And therefore, we need to consider how we place products in the different markets, to whom we sell them, and so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
And in regards of contracts, it's interesting what you read out there, because this typical scenario that I say, I don't want to deal with EPR. I mean, it's reasonable, right? I mean, it's a lot of efforts and burden.
You want to sell me products to me, you take care of all the hassle.
Yeah, right.
Right.
So I'm a party. I'm in the Netherlands in this case, and I sell products to you. And in the contract, you say, Andre, please be so kind to take care of EPR in every member state where you or where I sell the products to.
Right.
But what happens? You, as a Dutch company, sell the products to end users, for example, in Spain or Italy or wherever. And then we have to consider the national legislation. So like the National Packaging Act in
And the thresholds and the
Spain
obligations.
and whatever. But me as your supplier, I'm not even mentioned in the definition of a producer. So even though it's in the contract, I'm not even able to fulfill your obligations in those receiving member states.
So your advice is, don't try to arrange that with contracts. Do what you have to do as your obligation in that market yourself, but arrange in a contract that you get the data.
Well, data are key.
Or share data back.
Data are key. So of course you require data, and those are tremendous though. I would advise to talk about EPR in contracts, in every contract, just to have a transparency, which is not there at the moment. Because if I don't talk about something, I expect every party involved to know obligations. But what happens if you sell to a retailer in another member state and he thinks, because nobody talked about it, he maybe thinks, hey, you're dealing with it. I mean, it's a Caspar product.
Right.
So Caspar's brand is on it. Caspar will deal with it.
Right.
And you think, hey, he's the importer. He's reselling the product in the other member states, so he deals with it.
Like that.
Nobody talks about it.
Right.
So in the worst case, what happens? Your retailer will be the one fined. He will be the one facing like the prohibition of sale. Is it any value for you? I don't think so. So because if he doesn't sell your product, you don't make that much money.
And also, you know, it's not worth not mentioning it. But then you come to the point of suppliers, supplier contracts, supplier onboarding. You know, and this is not only an issue that we've noted our customers have difficulties with when they are importing themselves, because it's like a loss of freedom just to onboard a new supplier because they have a great product. You know, if you start to sell a great product, then you better start to think about how you're going to sell it. It's not even about product. You know, we have our risk assessment trainings in September. I used to start our trainings with, it's all about product. And then we start to move, it's actually all about supplier. And now we are at the point, actually, it's about your role in the supply chain and the route to market in all the member states. And then you know what to deal with the supplier. And then you can have products under that. So this is top tier where you need to start.
Yeah, you need a supplier management, of course.
A little bit the same as if you're not sure about what's your brand worthiness, and you have always a discussion at the coffee maker about, is this important for us or not? Then nobody can actually solve these complex because they're so entwined with what you are doing. And I think if you have those supply chain roles mapped clearly, the number of combinations, they might be mind-boggling to you, but it's like a puzzle. If you have never done a puzzle before and you're not aware that puzzles have corners and that blue sky might be the top of the puzzle and the green grass might be the bottom, then it's quite impossible to solve it. But the moment you start to, you know, analyze yourself and be clear of where am I today, where do I expect that I will run into tomorrow, then you realize, hey, we need systems, but also we need people. We didn't have the people, so that's the old solution. We tried to solve the new solution with the old one. We had no people, we had no system, but we had Excel, which didn't work.
We had no processes, so we had no awareness.
Right.
We thought about this issue being like a one-man show.
Right.
Well, it's not. It's like every department somehow is involved in this issue. So make it a day-to-day business.
Sure. Let's go back 1928, 1975, backwards to today. It's the same. Nobody in Brussels, you know, yeah, you can have a discussion about how harmonized is it and could it be smarter? Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Sufficient room for improvement. We all agree on that. But the main goal of all this legislation hasn't changed. And the reason that France and Italy and others in Germany with their registers are now picking it up is simply because we are not merely reaching the recycle goals that we have set ourselves. And they were not really ambitious, you know. So I guess you get the legislation that you deserve, basically. That's what. And we all made a lot of money, and we grew our companies based on it. So let's, if you feel difficult that your company cannot solve it, after this session, cross the street, look left, right, then cross the street. Or if you're from England, look right, left, cross the street, and look at your building. Think, if we can't solve it, who will? And as with many legislations, I think the moment you got questions from the market and you are able to prove that you understand it, you have a problem owner, you have budget, you have a plan and ambitions, and you monitor progress, then everybody is considerable happy, because basically you need to start behaving as market surveillance. André, do you see that there's this modern, let's say, the supply chain as market surveillance approach? Do you see that companies are starting to audit and start asking questions among each other?
Yeah, some have to. I mean, especially the marketplaces,
Right.
they have to do it, because
Right.
if they don't act correctly, or if they sell products which are not compliant, or products of producers which are not registered accordingly,
Right.
those are the ones that may be fined.
They have everything to lose.
So they can lose like everything, and that's what they don't want. So it's part of the risk management to deal with that.
Right. So if somebody walks away from this in a few more minutes, top 3 tips to prepare themselves before they pick up the phone and look you up on LinkedIn or me, and then start calling you or sending questions.
Well,
Or
that's a good
perhaps
tip,
wait
though.
for a second session in a couple of months when we have a little bit more clarity. But there must be, if somebody calls you for a meeting, you probably have like 2 or 3 things what you say. You need to be prepared a little bit before you enter the session.
Yeah, I need to be somehow aware of the status quo. So
Right.
where am I at actually, and what's the goal? Where do I want to head for?
Yeah.
Do I just want to keep on troubleshooting, or do I want to deal with all of these issues strategically? Do I want to implement it? Whatever.
Right.
What are the main needs? Is there some real big struggle because I may lose market access in a very short term?
Right.
I should avoid that, of
Right.
course. What's the risk? But if I want to take care of a risk management, I need knowledge. So I can't manage a risk if I do not know about it, right?
Right.
So I should deal with that, and I should switch my mind somehow. All of these issues, if it's product compliance or if it's EPR, it's not just a burden, it's not just waste. Yeah, you need to take care of it, of course, but it's about compliant market access.
Right.
Your company can't grow if you don't deal with it. So you have to be in it to win it.
You gave the example as, if there is in the future, or maybe you provide it voluntarily as a company, if there's digital access to why you have done things and what does it actually mean and why your statements are actually true, somebody looking at that is interested in it and find it as a valuable property of your business proposition.
Yeah, sure.
So if there's a reason why you believe that greenwashing is relevant, then why you don't make it relevant? That's basically what you said, right?
Yeah, sure.
Maybe that's a good point
maybe think about EPR also differently.
Okay.
There are so many. What you can do if there's a new obligation, you can just apply it in the easiest, simplest way, right?
Right.
But maybe think about EPR differently as well. Use it as an enabler, and use it for upsell as well.
Right.
I mean, you just mentioned digital information. So if there's someone looking for like environmental information, sorting instructions for Italy,
right.
Why shouldn't he be interested in just buying your green line or whatever? So refer to other green products or whatever. Use it in order to think about an upsell.
Right. There's definitely, I've looked at my list. We have talked an hour almost.
And we didn't talk about packaging or packaging marking, especially in regards of the Tryman.
And we talked about the fact that there need to be markings on it. But the markings are the least worry, because if you know why, then you also can manage it. Yeah. But is there anything that you want to say about those markings?
About those markings? Well, first, I'm excited to see what happens when the new draft of the packaging directive will be out there.
Yeah.
There is one thing which I think is quite interesting and somehow making me hope. Because I don't know if you realized that Luxembourg just published, or in Luxembourg, they entered a new packaging act into force in June this year. And if I review the draft, they refer to sorting instructions in Luxembourg as well. But those didn't enter into force. So there's a new obligation which is called like material identification. So we have that already in Bulgaria, in Latvia, in Malta, in Italy from 1st January 2023. So this is not really new, but they didn't enter into force sorting instructions. And this is making me somehow hopeful, because maybe this is a hint on what we can expect when the packaging directive or regulation is going to be published as a draft.
You think somebody in Luxembourg might have seen a draft on a copy machine?
Hopefully.
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 We also didn't discuss the whole gift and premium sector, which is going to put products in the market with somebody's brand. And they are going to hand it out or ship it to consumers probably on trade shows everywhere in Europe. And these quantities are considerable, because it's a $10 billion market. And I think that will be definitely a future topic to see what could be the impact, or maybe separate event.
Yeah, it's special. It's really special because there are providers on the market which often are not identifiable as a producer on the product, because it's all private label.
Right.
It's everything from their customers.
Right.
And therefore, the awareness to apply related symbols or to go for registrations and so on, to provide relevant data, the awareness is not there.
So especially the purchasing departments of those companies that are doing something around brands might not even, might not is an understatement. They won't know about EPR.
They won't know about EPR.
No.
And often, if I have like gifts, I mean, who's acquiring the gifts in a company? Is it the purchasing department? Often it's marketing.
It's marketing.
So we got a different role, and
so
they're not aware.
The branch itself needs to have a proactive role to their customers, because they have a shared problem. It doesn't really matter who is your customer. They will end up with obligations.
Yes, so, then it's about education, information, transparency, also in regards of e.g. contracts.
This is the advantage is this is quite a well, there are several branch organizations, but it's quite well organized. André, anything as a last statement for today, or is it the see you next time?
If you like, see you next time. Of course, I mean,
I cannot guarantee that you will be the second one on the Compliance Tuesday Talk. There might be a different topic in between, but so there will be a session as a follow-up on this with our person in Brussels.
Perfect.
So definitely you'll be there. If you have feedback, we'll save the chat and we'll look at that. My email, André, his email, we will share that on anyway. Send us your thoughts, ideas. Can be blunt, we will filter. You can be blunt. We've been blunt as well, because if you not take this seriously, you are in some shit. That's trouble. So we'll definitely have that session. It might be well to position that when the draft is there. So that could be somewhere to do in Q4, somewhere in November. I'll give you the information how you can sign up for our mailing list, so that we can keep you informed on that. And we'll keep you in the loop of some ideas or suggestions that we run into. André, thank you very much.
It's been a pleasure.
It was fun to kick off this Compliance Tuesday Talk. Also give us your honest feedback on this format. We are trying. We thought no slides, the Q&A. Yeah, I've given you the opportunity to respond upfront or also afterwards. No slides, no nonsense, to be continued. Thank you. Have a great day, and see you soon again. Bye-bye.
Thank you.